makes us feel right. I'm just getting off the train. Never see my vision work all day.
All right. Let's see. Let me get everybody admitted to our meeting. Welcome, everyone. All right, here we go. Make sure. All right. Let's see. Let me get everybody admitted to our meeting. Welcome, everyone. All right. So I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. Make sure. All right. Let's see. Let me get everybody admitted to our meeting. Welcome, everyone. Okay, hearing a little bit of feedback on my end. Let's see if I can mute. Okay, hearing a little bit of feedback on my end. Let's see if I can mute. Okay, hearing a little bit of feedback on my end. Uh-oh. So we're having some audio issues on my end, and I want to apologize to everyone. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Uh-oh. I'm not sure where the feedback is coming from. And I want to apologize to everyone. Okay, let's see if I can kill our Facebook feed. That's probably it. That's probably where it's coming from. Looks like it was happening on my end. All right, so can everybody hear me okay? All right, so now everybody can hear me okay. I think I fixed our audio issues. Hopefully you're tuning in to us on In Touch News, internet radio, heard all over the world where everyone is a star. This show will be recorded so we can obviously pick it up on the Soul Purpose Show. You are with Soul Purpose Show. I'm your host, Keith. I am solo today without my lovely co-host, my lovely and talented co-host, Monica, because she is on she's so much in demand that sometimes I have to kind of drive this boat by myself. So I just appreciate everybody continuing to tune in. I'm not really going to delay to get into the meat of our show today, because I think everyone has seen the events of this week. Historic events can be characterized, and understands the historical significance of what happened. So we can't pretend that we don't know that a police officer, for the first time that I can remember, was actually convicted in the murder of an unarmed Black man. And although we certainly have collected a panel of esteemed subject matter experts, legal minds, and law enforcement professionals, our challenge is really not to break down kind of play by play of the case itself. But I think what we need to focus on is really kind of understanding the real issue, the real question that's on everybody's mind, which is, where do we go from here? The verdict is in. That specific individual was guilty, but now the noise has continued around terms like police reform, and defunding the police, and who won and who lost. So everyone has opinions about these things, but we typically formulate our opinions based on what we hear in the media. And so, as you know, this is a show where you get information, and you get information really kind of from the source. So what we put together is just an outstanding panel of individuals that are going to help bring some insight into this subject. And yet another special edition of the Soul Purpose Show. Two attorneys. One of them is actually currently serving as the duly elected state of Florida House Representative for District 70, and a career law enforcement professional whose career has really taken him from being a street patrolman on the street to really the highest ranking position within a police force in one of our major school districts police force. So first, let's welcome. I'm going to ask Attorney Corey Smith to unmute his mic. He has his own private law practice down in West Palm Beach area, specializing in criminal defense. How are you today, sir?
Hey, good morning, Brother Keith. How are you? Good to be here.
Doing great. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Next, I want to bring in Chief Luke Williams. I've known Chief Williams for many, many, many years. He's going to share his insights into this subject, having spent his entire career in law enforcement. How are you, Chief?
I'm doing great, Brother Keith. Thanks for having us this morning.
Absolutely, and thank you for being here. And then finally, we're really blessed to have an appearance by a woman who is not only a dynamic civil rights attorney and social justice advocate, but she's really taken her fight to the Capitol, representing District 70 in the Florida State House. Please welcome Representative Michele Raynor Goolsby. How are you, Madam
Hey,
Representative?
how are you? Thank y'all so much for having me, Keith. Happy to be here on this esteemed panel this morning.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much. And so, listen, we're gonna jump right into this, Corey. I'm gonna ask you if you would. This verdict and this trial were unique, right? Because and you were a criminal defense attorney. So the defense in this case was actually the police, and so you're accustomed to representing individuals that are probably not the police. But share with our audience, like, why was this particular case unique, and how and who was against who in this case?
Well, I mean, you stated it about as plain as it can be stated. I'll push back just a little bit on the uniqueness of it. It's newer. It's not unique, but it's newer. And I say that because I am actually right here in West Palm Beach, Riviera Beach area, where our local prosecutor, state attorney Dave Ehrenberg, with his two top assistants, Alexia Cox and Adrian Ellis, they prosecuted a policeman here within the last couple of years by the name of Newman Raja, who had shot motorist Corey Jones on the side of I-95 a few years ago. It kind of got some national attention. And Newman Raja is actually serving multiple years and multiple decades in prison right now. That said, it's not as unique. It's not unique, but it's still rare. Most of the times I'm dealing with, and we're dealing with, people who are, accused of committing crimes. And very rarely do we end up going to trial. But in those rare instances where we do go to trial, you're actually, cross-examining the police and trying to poke holes in the state's case. Whereas here in this case, it's the same. It's the same thing. It's just that the police officer is the one who's the defendant,
Yeah.
and that's pretty rare. So, it's good from a criminal defense perspective. I mean, those of us who've been criminal defense lawyers all these years, we've always said, hey, hold police accountable just like you hold the rest of us accountable. And so it's refreshing to see that. And I'll even take an anecdotal evidentiary and make an anecdotal statement. Like here in Palm Beach County, I haven't heard as many instances in the different localities and municipalities of police brutality, or at least being people getting brutalized by police since the Newman Raja trial.
Mm.
So, elected officials matter. State attorneys' offices matter, because I think officers are now on notice. And the more that a Derek Chauvin, a Newman Raja, these types of cases happen, the more you'll have police being more reluctant to resort to the force that might result in the taking of a life unnecessarily. So,
Excellent. And those are excellent points. And especially when you talk about holding police accountable, we're actually really fortunate for our viewers to be able to hear from a career law enforcement official who's really kind of worn a lot of hats. And I've known Chief Williams for many years, and I would love for you to just share a little bit as a law enforcement officer. What is your first reaction when you hear these headlines? It says, police either shoot or kill another unarmed black man. What goes on in your mind, Chief?
Well, good morning again, Keith, and thank you for having me. And as you stated, I've spent 33 years as a police officer in the city of St. Petersburg, and I spent the last 18 of those years as an assistant chief. And for the last 3 years, I've been serving as the chief of police for Pinellas County Schools District Police. And when you see articles like that, or you see the headlines, and you see that another citizen has been shot, you have to know that policing is a difficult profession. But at the same time, it is also one of the professions where you receive probably more training than any other profession. And I think some of the things that we're seeing in the media is a result of either poor training or just not adhering to the training models that you've actually been involved in. So it is a profession that can be inherently dangerous, but I also know that the most effective agencies are those agencies that build relationships with the community. They take it seriously, and when something does occur, they're quick to basically explain what happened as well as they can based upon state statute. But at the same time, admit if they made a mistake, correct that mistake. And if they haven't, then you have to be able to say, this is what we did and this is why we did it. Unfortunately, some states do not have the sunshine law like we do, because there are some agencies that don't have to tell you what action, if any, they took against an officer who's been accused of some type of infraction or misconduct. The state of Florida is not like that, because you can request information, and Florida under the sunshine allows that you get the information on the officer. So I think that the more we concentrate on getting the proper leadership in positions of power and authority within organizations, the better your organization will be, especially if that leader understands the dynamics and the importance of working hand in hand with the community.
Well, interesting that you would bring up proper leadership, because Madam Representative, you actually have a very unique role in this dynamic, and also a unique role on this call, because you're going to be the one responsible for, as my other frat brother Roland Martin says on his show, bringing the funk, right? Because as a legislator, I mean, your primary responsibility is to represent all of your constituents, and not just Black or white people, but unarmed Black civilians, as well as uniformed police officers, some of whom are huge supporters of you. And so share with us, so when you get a report of an officer involved shooting in your district, and then there's some immediate pressure to say, okay, now you got to take sides, how do you deal with that balance?
Yeah, so I mean, Keith, that's a great question. And unfortunately, right after I got sworn in November, there was an officer involved shooting in my district. And because, people also know me as, being out with protesters and, protesting and being an organizer, they immediately thought that I was going to jump and say, okay, this is, whatever, just this is why all police are bad, blah, blah, blah. And I, had to pivot, and I had to say, listen, we don't know all the facts. And because I am now elected, I'm put in a position where I get facts earlier than the public, right? And some of those facts I'm not able to share or disseminate with the public. So I kind of have to sit on that. So really, for me, is really getting with, I have a great relationship with Chief Holloway here in St. Petersburg, and also a couple other sheriffs, Sheriff Chronister, who also I have a little bit of Hillsborough. He and I have a very good relationship, and Sheriff Wells down in Manatee, and even to a certain extent, Sheriff Galtieri. So I really try to, hey, call, reach out, hey, listen, this is what's going on, to defer to them, and then let the investigation bear out before I make a determination of my thoughts or opinion. Because really, specifically in this point, the community is looking at its leaders to see how they're going to react and take the cues. So you have to be really, really mindful and really, really cautious. So I try to work with law enforcement to get an understanding as to what is going on, but also listening to the community as well about what do they see, how do they feel, why do they think that these things happen, and go from there.
Well, Corey, you mentioned that your role, a part of your role, though, as representing as a defense attorney, representing those individuals who've been charged with crimes. You said something very interesting. Is you have to kind of start to poke holes in police behavior. So how does that make Representative Raynor's job difficult, Chief Williams' job difficult? Like it feels like a part of your role is on behalf of the defendant or the individuals that you're representing. You're the one that's really using the sunshine law and all of this kind of openness to really kind of poke and try to find holes. So comment on that a little bit.
Well, it depends. In the situation where there's an officer who's a defendant, I didn't watch the trial for mental health reasons. George Floyd, and I posted this on my page, that it's an easy case, but it's so powerful in that, it's 9 minutes of, watching that man's life leave him. It's just really hard to watch. That said, I was watching people talk about it and dealing with, what the defense attorney had to deal with from his perspective, because his job is to represent the client and to make sure that the state can prove its case beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. So if there's anything in the state's case that you can create that doubt with, it's his job to raise it. So you do use public records requests, anything that might come out in the minutes on a sunshine meeting, of any kind of commission or board that might shed light on the issue. You use that. There was one, I'm trying to think, there was one part that I did see in the trial, and a friend of mine actually called me about it, and it's slipping my mind right now. It was with respect to the, and I can't remember what it was, but at any rate, the point being that it's the defense attorney's job, and he actually is held to that standard with the Florida bar to actually raise those issues, or else you can lose your bar license, or at least have a bar complaint filed against you, and that's designed for a reason. It's like that so that everybody gets, quote unquote, the same type of representation. Everybody's rights are protected. So that's the role of a defensive attorney, and it's hard sometimes. I've gotten asked that question several thousand times over the last 23 years. Like, how can you represent somebody knowing they did what they have been charged with? And matter of fact, my 13-year-old daughter's asked me that.
Wow.
And the answer is, it's not really about that. It's about whether or not the state can prove whether or not a person did something, because the state in all its power has great leverage over its citizens. So if you are going to threaten somebody's liberty, and we live in a free society, quote unquote, you have to be able to prove that this person did what you said they did if you're going to take their liberty away from them. So we in America value our freedom, quote unquote. So it takes a very high amount of evidence, and it's set, the burden is set very high for that reason. So
It-
it is what it is.
Interesting points. And Chief, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to try to give Madam Representative an opportunity to talk about the actual George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and what it means for when legislation affects what local police forces do. But Chief, first I want to get your perspective on something Corey said, which is he didn't watch the trial because of just really the emotional and mental toll that it takes on you. For us as Black men, to have to watch another Black man on the ground literally getting the life choked out of him. And what was your perspective? What did you see as a sitting officer, law enforcement officer? Like, what was your observation?
Well, you can take what you just said and compound it by adding on to that fact that you are an African American male, add on that you're a police officer, and you become part of a fraternity, so to speak, of no matter what goes on around the country, the consensus of the people is that if they do it, you must do it too. And so my struggle and my battle is to make sure that first and foremost, when it's wrong, you say it's wrong, and what the defendant in this case did was absolutely wrong. And for any person in law enforcement to say that it wasn't, then I think they're being less than truthful with themselves. But I think one of the toughest jobs is being able to continue to explain to our children. And the reason why I am where I am in this location today is because I've been mentoring kids all my career. And to me, that is the way that we can make a true difference in the community. So if I'm telling a young African American male, this is what you do when you encounter a police officer, and this is how you survive it. You're not going to win an argument on the side of the street, but this is what you need to do to make sure that your voice is heard if you felt like you've been done wrong. In this particular instance, kudos to the jury, kudos to the videographer that was there, the young lady that took the video, to the bystanders and the paramedic, off-duty paramedic, all the people who were basically there. I didn't watch the entire trial, but as much as I could, I wanted to see it because I knew what the outcome should have been. There was just a question on my mind what the outcome would be. Of course, Brother Corey knows that when you all do the jury selection, you're looking for some folk that's going to see things from the defense's perspective, or the same thing with the prosecution. They're looking for those people who they feel that can be allies. And in our current political climate, there are some questions in my mind if we'd be able to get a person who would actually come in and actually do what the Constitution and what the United States is basically founded upon, is that you can have a jury of your peers that will basically hear your trial and make those types of decisions. So my challenge is to make sure that what I'm telling these young men that I'm meeting with every second Saturday of the month, what I'm telling you is true. And so what they see on television around the country with what's happening to particularly African Americans is very difficult to come back and say what you see is not normal when it seems that it really is. But when you look at the number of police agencies and the number of officers that are involved and engaged with people, you have to realize that it's a small fraction of what's going on, but you're talking about a very, very important issues of contact that comes between the officers. And we'll use George Floyd as an example. Never should have come to that, and it never really should have come to that. So it's very difficult to watch, but it's even more difficult to go back and try to explain to our young people that what we're telling them is true, and basically to trust the system.
I got to tell you, Madam Representative, here's what I'm hearing, and we're fortunate to have you for a few more minutes here before we go to break. And I know that your schedule has you obligated to do something else. But before you leave, here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing jury of peers, the officer on the streets. Like, these are policing is local. The type of policing that has made national headlines is local.
Right.
And you know, I've read the notes. There's federal legislation now that talks about the Justice Department being able to have more subpoena powers into local police forces and these kind of things, requiring officers to have uniformed police officers to have body worn cameras. These are local, for the most part. These are local decisions. What is federal legislation going to do to influence local police behavior? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One, I think you hit the nail on the head. All policing is local. So, federal, legislation provides a guide and allows, and I think Chief Williams would be able to even speak to this a little bit better than me, but provides a guide for what law enforcement should or should not be doing, and understanding if certain things happen or certain things don't do or do not happen, there would be in violation of federal law. But also, I think moreover, federal law guides what we do on a state level in the legislature. So right now we have a police reform bill. It is an incredible first step. It definitely does not go as far as we would like it. So there are pieces that we had to work with a Republican dominated legislature, right? The Republicans have a supermajority. So we had to really do a bipartisan effort to kind of see some of the pieces from the Justice and Policing Act, here in Florida. So we have, you cannot arrest a child under the age of 7. I mean, and hopefully in a few years that number will go up. We have that. There's a our law does not go as far as banning chokeholds, but it.
I think we lost a little bit of your audio. Can you still hear us, Madam Representative? I think we lost a little bit of audio, at least on my end. Oh, is she back? Okay. What I'm gonna.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
I'm here. I can hear y'all. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So what I was saying is that our one of the pieces of this policing reform allows for there to be chokeholds, but to a certain extent. And I know that is like, guys, but hopefully, if we get the Justice and Policing Act passed in the Senate and signed by President Biden, we're gonna have to come and look at that and conform our policing laws and our reforms that we have in the state to what federal law says. So, it's really important that, that it gets passed in the Senate and it heads to President Biden's desk. But also we have to make sure that even locally and statewide, we elect folks that align with all of our values, not just Black folks' values or white folks' values, everyone's values, to be elected to make these laws with regard to policing and police reform.
That's very insightful, and it is frustrating for us, right? For us regular civilians, hearing about things that are happening at the federal level, things that may even be happening, at the state level, and understanding that when we leave our homes every day, what we see are, community policing. And we're going to talk a little bit about what community police looks like, but we see people in our community that we get the sense, aren't really connected to this bigger thing. It's all about right now. It's all about what's happening on the, in front of us. And again, Madam Representative, I know I know that we're going to be losing you here as we go into break. I know we've got a couple more minutes, but I'm going to ask you, if you would, Madam Representative, just to kind of share with our audience some closing thoughts from your perspective on what can we as citizens, and we're trying to hold our law enforcement officials accountable. We're also holding our elected officials accountable. What kind of things are you looking for from us to help you? You are a storied civil rights activist, social justice advocate. What do you need? What's your message to those of us in the voting populace?
So my message is, do not get weary in well doing. It is hard to stay engaged, right? People have lives, they have children, they have spouses, they have jobs. And I always would say, and Monica will tell you this, I always say, wherever your hands find you, do that, do that. So whether it's, for my wife, her thing is the school board. That's, that's not my thing, but her thing is the school board, being involved. For other folks in maybe city community and sorority, or maybe in AACP, but wherever you, find yourself, your niche at, do work through those organizations or with a collective group of people, and to keep the pressure. So I don't mind. I know some, electeds don't like when they get emails from their constituents, or I don't mind that. I try to answer as much emails. I've had constituents highlight things to me that I didn't even realize was an issue. And I was like, wait, this doesn't sound right.
Okay, and I know some of your audio is still broken up, Madam Representative, which is fine, because and sometimes it's a blessing. Here's what I heard, because it was actually slowed down for our viewing audience, our listening audience, just to be able.
Go look at this,
Okay.
and then I'm able to kind of uplift that.
Yeah, I'm still hearing some lags in the audio from my end.
Can you hear me now? Is there a
Yeah.
lag now?
There you go. All right.
Okay. What I was saying was, engagement plus action, and whatever that looks like, whether it's writing letters, whether it's going to school board meetings, whether it's meeting with elected officials, whether it's organizing around, a problematic elected official or a problematic entity. That is what, and then also developing partnerships and relationships with people in leadership as well, because there are certain people I know, when they call me, I know it's not on no foolishness, and I know that I can take their word to the bank. So those are some of the things that I think about when what can, just regular lay people who are not necessarily elected, because to me, I always tell folks, those who aren't elected, in my opinion, have the most power. You know why? Because you can vote us out who do not do what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I tell you, those are golden words, and what I heard loud and clear, even through some of the back and forth with the audio, was don't get weary in well doing. Find a place where you fit in, and get active and get engaged. There's lots of organizations out there that are on the front lines, and I know that there are individuals like yourself who have demonstrated the courage and the conviction to be on the front lines of this fight for social justice. And so again, Madam Representative, we really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule join us and give us some words of wisdom. And we certainly look forward to big things from you in the future as a rising star in the party as well. So
thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you and Monica and the work that y'all do.
Thank you. So thank you again. So enjoy the rest of your Saturday. We're gonna go into break. I just want to set this up by saying what these brothers are going to be sharing with us on the other side of this. We're going to get into the use of force, and we're going to get into police training and how our police train. And most interestingly, I think, is we're going to talk about this whole popular notion of defunding the police and what does that mean. So you were at the Soul Purpose Show. You were Chief Luke Williams and Attorney Corey Smith, Esquire, of his own private practice. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back on the other side. Soul Purpose Show.
Wherever we go, we about to bring on the positive vibe. Wherever we
In Touch Radio, where you can listen to a cruising flow of smooth soul and jazz, today's R&B, a fun touch of hip hop and gospel.
All my music on one station.
Giving you a buffet of music, news, and entertainment. We're In Touch Radio.
The Storks are bringing me a baby brother. We can do this together.
All right, let's go.
Storks know how to keep kids safe. Do you?
What?
Oh my gosh, you don't know.
I know.
You don't. Oh man, you laugh when you're uncomfortable.
No.
Making sure your child is in the right car seat is one of the steps to safer travel.
I will rock this.
You will rock this.
To know for sure that your child is in the right car seat for their age and size, visit safercar.gov/the right seat.
Cool. Very cool.
Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
It's important to plan ahead for emergencies, like the storm. When it kicked in, we had a plan.
Separated.
We were able to get in touch with each other in no time.
Idea how to find each other.
The whole experience was
the
fine.
most frightening 10 hours of my life.
If there's one piece of advice I'd offer other moms out there, it's to stay calm and keep to the plan.
Message.
Some parents plan ahead, some don't. Make sure you know where to find your family in an emergency. Start your plan at ready.gov. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
This brutal weather that we experience every year in Florida leaves hundreds of residents needing repairs to their property. If your home has been damaged or needs remodeling, leave it to the professionals. Call Reeves Building, Plumbing, and Roofing at 813-238-6197. That's 813-238-6197. Reeves Building, Plumbing, and Roofing have been serving the community for 43 years. Reeves Building, Plumbing, and Roofing is a proud sponsor of Jazz at Miss Connie's house.
In Touch Radio, where you can listen to a cruising flow of smooth soul and jazz. Today's R&B, a fun touch of hip hop and gospel.
All my music on one station.
Giving you a buffet of music, news, and entertainment. We're In Touch Radio.
Wherever we go, we about to bring on the positive vibe. Wherever we
All right. Welcome back to the Soul Purpose Show. I'm your host, Keith. I'm flying solo today because my lovely co-host is actually on assignment. Actually talking about pay equity. So we are always on the forefront of those things that affect Black folks. Joining me on today's show are two really esteemed brothers that I consider friends as well. But I've known Chief Williams for many years, and he is a career law enforcement officer, and I'm sure that he has some interesting perspective to share on this whole use of force conversation. At the core of apprehending a subject that is either in the act of or suspected of having or sometimes even having an outstanding warrant for some type of a criminal matter is the attending officer's right to be able to use force to subdue that individual. So Chief, why is there so much disagreement over the specifics of how much force to use, when to use it, when it's too much? Why is there so much disagreement over that?
I just think it's an interpretation of policy. And again, policing can be very difficult and situations can be very fluid, but we do have use of force guidelines. We do have continuums that basically tell you that if this type of action is happening, this is some considerations that you could have, and this is the type of force that you could use. And police officers, by law, can take their use of force one step above that, which is being presented to them. So if a person, as a really basic example, if a person pushes an officer and the officer is going to take that person into custody, they can grab that person, and if necessary, they can take that person to the ground. So, but when we talk about the use of force, again, when you look at chokeholds and strangleholds, I spent 32 years at St. Petersburg Police Department, and chokeholds throughout my career were never legal. They had always been against policy. Now, in the case of a use of deadly force, you could, if that's the only thing that's going to save your life or save someone else's life. Say a person has you down on the ground, and they're either striking you, doing something to you where you feel like you're about to die within the next few seconds, and you choke that person, then that would be justified, even though it is against policy. So there's a lot that goes into the training. And as the current chair of the Police Standards Council, which is comprised of the sheriff and every chief of police in Pinellas County, there's about 10 of us that meet on a monthly basis in conjunction with representatives from the Department of Juvenile Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, just a number of people who sit in the emergency management community. And we talked about the George Floyd case, and we wanted to make sure that the policies that we have in place, because we're so used to working together during natural disasters like hurricanes and so forth. So it just made perfect sense for us to make sure that all our policies meshed. So what we wanted to make sure is that there were 8 simple things that were put out called 8 Can't Wait. And as a group, we sat down and we took a look at all our policies throughout all agencies. And I can tell you, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 agencies with 1 or 2 policies, all the recommendations that were made by this group were already in place. Like I mentioned, chokeholds. It had always been allowed for my entire career at St. Petersburg, is that you could not do a chokehold on a person or a stranglehold. The requirement to use de-escalation when you're dealing with a person. You have to have a use of force continuum, which basically tells you the graduated levels of force that you can use based upon what's being presented to you. Basically, you have to require a warning before you use deadly force. So you just don't shoot somebody. You have to tell them to what you will need them to do to stop and to prevent them from being shot. And basically, a restriction on shooting at moving vehicles, exhausting all reasonable means of apprehension before using deadly force, requiring a duty to intervene, which is very important. If an officer sees another officer doing something that they should not be doing, it should, going back to the Chauvin trial, if the community was standing there and they're telling this guy that what he's doing is killing this individual, the other officer should have basically pulled him off of Mr. Floyd. And then basically having a comprehensive reporting mechanism so that we know that what type of uses of force are out there and being able to report that back to the community. So we've taken an initiative to make sure that our policies throughout the county mesh and that they actually do those things that could prevent the use of force, especially the use of deadly force.
Wow, I tell you, Brother Smith, he makes it sound, it's so clear, it's so straightforward. There's guidelines, there's you do this, then you do this. If this doesn't happen, then you do this. Why are we still continuously having these issues around people questioning how force is used if they can't, if they don't just follow what Chief Williams is saying? Why are we still here?
Well, I mean, my opinion on that, it is my opinion. Obviously, we all have them. It lies at the intersection of white supremacy and those standards. I believe that we live in the United States of America, and there's a 500-year history of us being in the Americas and what our lives have traditionally meant to the larger community and our actual inclusion into society. So I mean, we know that way back in what was it, 2006, the FBI did a report that basically said that white supremacists had invaded law enforcement, or had infiltrated a lot of law enforcement. So when you have that intersection of just implicit bias that we all have, but when you focus that in with respect to white supremacy and the devaluing of and dehumanization of Black lives, you may have a situation where the default is to pull the trigger when you're dealing with a Black person, where in juxtaposition to you might tackle the white kid, and you might catch a blade to your jacket, or you might catch a scratch to your arm, you might need some stitches, but you're alive and that kid is alive, as opposed to you've been trained or socialized to believe that Black life doesn't matter as much, and you might not even be aware of it. Because I think we're all victims of that kind of socialization, and if we're honest about it, we are, Black people included. So I think when you have that intersection of standards training, which Chief and Brother Williams set out very, very distinctly, when you have that intersection and you add in the element that white supremacy has trained us not to value our own lives, and definitely has trained those who are willing to believe that our lives don't matter. And you got to excuse the noise. I got a 9-year-old in the background. He's having a good day. Then you have situations where you have a George Floyd. And again, I posted about this before. That's an easy case. The hard case is Ma'Khia Bryant. That's the hard case. That's the hard case, because you can clearly see her with the knife and she's clearly going at the other girl. But, my position has always been and will remain that girl's life mattered, just like anybody else's lives mattered. And there could have been things done to prevent her from being shot 4 times.
So
I think the intersectionality of white supremacy and those standards are where the disconnect comes.
So I'm gonna kick it back to Chief Williams with really kind of the same question, because you're doing the same thing, right? So implicit bias is now entered into the conversation. We know that we are affected by it ourselves. We're all, victims, if you will, of these preconceived notions of what we're seeing out there in the streets. And police officers are human beings. So really the question goes back to training. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about training as well. So what I'm almost hearing is that police officers are not really trained to recognize biases against this type of individual who looks this way, and that type of individual who looks this way. So talk to us about how police are actually trained and made aware, or are they at all? Or is it different from police force to police force?
The training aspect is getting better over time once we realize that there are implicit and explicit biases that exist in all of us. And so Reverend Kenny Irby has been instrumental in training my staff, and I know he trains the St. Petersburg Police Department currently on implicit and explicit biases. And, there is some pushback from some folk who feel like this training is not necessary, but then it boils down to leadership. If you, as the head of that organization, says that this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is the difference that we're going to make in the community by having the benefit of this training, and if it comes from the top down, then you have better buy-in. And there's always, policing is no different than any other profession. You're dealing and you're selecting your employees from the larger human community, and so you're going to get all types of folk. And part of my job and part of my task has been throughout my career that if I'm able to identify somebody that has those the racist type mentality that Brother Corey Smith mentioned, it is my personal duty to make sure that they're no longer an employee of the organization. And it's not something that I'm going to be following that person. It's just that when you identify a misbehavior, you have to deal with it, and you can't turn a blind eye to it. And we have to communicate what we're doing to correct issues with the community. And we can't pretend as if there's nothing going on or there's nothing wrong with the way we do things. So it's very important to have the proper leadership that's going to have the gumption to call a duck if it's a duck, but then also get rid of people who needs to be getting rid of. and do it without any type of remorse. And sometimes it makes you an unpopular person, but this job sometimes it's going to call for a person who's going to stand up to what's morally right for the whole of the community.
Well, I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit more, Brother Smith, and since we're on this issue of bias, right? And Brother Williams just talked about support from the community, and so we know what we hear from law enforcement officers is we develop a bias around what's happening in our own, from Black law enforcement officers especially, what's happening in our own communities, because we can't get cooperation from the community. There's always going to be good guys and there's going to be bad guys. We can't always blame, white supremacy or white bias on the good guys and bad guys in our own community sometimes. And why is it so difficult to get the community to help those officers who are saying, look, if you cooperate with me, I'm taking out the bad guys. I don't care what they look like. They look like me, fine. I'm still taking them out. So talk to us about the kind of the no snitch policy and the lack of cooperation that some of our police officers have to endure.
Well, I mean, I have no shortage of sympathy for officers when they have to deal with those kind of people. I mean, obviously, we want our communities to be safe, and we want our communities to be good. Basically, we want to be able to raise our children in safe communities. So when you have an attitude, and it's a culture thing, and I don't mean that to say that it's Black culture. It's a no snitch culture. Where it's lionized to or made popular or made to be cool, to be seen as somebody who, hey, I don't cooperate with police. I let people do illegal things in my community and mess my community up, which is ludicrous, right? I think we have to teach our kids better. Number one, that's where it begins, obviously, in the home. But also we have to continue to support those programs that are in our communities that support our kids, that try to keep them off the streets. And within those actual programs, you have those kinds of teachings and those kinds of examples of people saying, hey, look, the no snitch thing is garbage. Okay, you don't want somebody on your corner dealing drugs. You don't want somebody, you don't want to be friends with the person who shot the guy around the corner. You don't want to be near any of that. So it's a paradigm shift that we have to engage in within our community as well. And I don't blame that on white supremacy. I think it's a symptom of the overall 500-year struggle that we've had. But still, it's on us to do something about it because it's our community.
Yeah.
So point is we gotta handle that internally as well.
That's an excellent point. And Brother Williams, is it fair for us to assume, one of you guys used the term de-escalation, is it fair for us to assume that throughout law enforcement training that we can actually prepare these human beings for each individual type of situation that's going to arise with respect to what judgment do you use to use this much force or that much force, or to come out of get out of your vehicle with your gun drawn because you see an active situation, and then now it's too late, right? Because now you've got to, because Brother Smith is talking about this Ma'Khia Bryant case. Now you've got to make a split-second decision to try to protect someone. So you already have your gun drawn versus you already have your taser drawn. So is it fair for us to assume that a police officer is always going to be able to be trained to de-escalate every situation?
Well, yeah, some situations, all you can do is verbal commands. In an active shooter type situation, you are going to basically tell that person, drop the weapon, drop the gun, or whatever before you shoot. And I'll use an example of a New Year's Eve. I almost had to shoot one of my classmates, a former classmate, high school classmate, because he was chasing his father with a knife, and he had tunnel vision. And until he realized what I was saying to him, he was going to stab his father. And it was at the point where I had pressure on my trigger, on my gun. And it was that split second when he realized what I was saying to him, and he saw me as a police officer, that he dropped the knife and discontinued. So that's just cutting it up into a finite, a small piece of the pie. But people have different experiences and they come from different places. And like Brother Smith said, there may be some implicit bias that is a whole lot more deeper than what we want it to be. So in the training and in the feedbacks from these training sessions that we have with the officers, if there's a person that is, because the behavior is going to be exhibited in the classroom, the same type of behavior that takes place on the street, attitudinal wise, is going to exhibit itself in the classroom. So it's important, incumbent upon the instructors and the supervisors and the chiefs and the sheriff to basically be able to identify those folk, try to get them to reverse their thinking, or just get rid of them altogether. So all the training that you do, you can, there are situations out there that haven't happened yet. I know Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun, but there are things you can't plan for some things, like, and I'll give an example. A school shooting was something that retired Assistant Chief Cedric Gordon and I worked on our promotion process. And one of our scenarios was this outlandish school shooting where the candidate had to basically demonstrate what would they do if someone came into a school and did the unthinkable, and then how would you handle the parents and all that stuff that comes after that. We had not had a school shooting when we were doing these scenarios. And now you think about going all the way back to Columbine, to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. That is something that happens too commonly and too regularly. And so things that we thought were would never happen are happening almost regularly. So we just have to continue to train, get better. But most of all, the folk that are in leadership positions can't be just taking a paycheck home. They need to be doing the job that it takes to get the right men and women out there on the street that can build relationships with the community, engage with the community, and do it genuinely. Because don't do it when it's promotion time, because you need some community service hours to show that you're actually engaged with the community. Now, that has to be something that is, I don't want to say is bred within you, but it's something that you have to develop over time, and you have to really, really want to do it, whether you're seeking promotion or not.
Well, I'm not going to let us leave this show and get away without talking about the term defund the police. I do want us to pivot a little bit to how we reestablish trust again from our community with police, or moving forward. Not even again, but moving forward with law enforcement. So, Brother Smith, I want to give you an opportunity to give some thoughts on that. How do we get past where we are now and start to really kind of trust what Chief Williams is saying is, yes, there's training, but yes, there's leadership, yes, there's better leadership, and all those kind of things. How do we start to get there?
I think, well, when we talk about defunding the police, obviously we all know that it doesn't necessarily mean take the money away from them. That's not what everybody's saying. Some people are, but that's not the actual idea. The actual idea is reimagining the whole paradigm. The whole thing. Sometimes you might not need a police officer when you're dealing with a mentally disabled person who's going through a crisis. You might not need an officer that's trained in, combative crisis type situations, and you bring that kind of training to a situation where you just got a kid, say like in Miami, where the guy was laying on the ground and he was dealing with the autistic kid and he shot at him anyway. So it's about reimagining what exactly we need to do, and then repurposing the funds that are used for policing to effectuate those ideals. It's not about, because I think when people hear defund the police, they hear, oh my God, my livelihood is going to be gone, I don't have a job. I don't think I don't see it like that. I think that we repurpose those funds and keep people in their jobs at the same time and repurpose them for whatever those purposes are. That's what I think defund the police is about. Do we need military vehicles in our neighborhoods? Probably not. So when so that part of it, yeah, I can agree. We don't need funding for tanks in our neighborhoods. We don't need that. So that's it in a nutshell for me.
So I tell you what's interesting to me is we've all been in a business or organizational environment where there are budgets, right? The way the budget game works is as a department leader, you put numbers together to say, this is how much I'm going to need to operate my budget. When I hear the term defund the police, more specific, when I hear the term repurposing funds, there's this bucket of money. I don't care how much it is. It's $1 million, it's $10 million, it's $50 million, whatever the police budget is. And then there's a number of trained uniform officers to go out and bust up the bad guys and bust up crime. Chief, how realistic is it that we take, you're never gonna get what you ask for in your budget. You're gonna get a little bit less than what you asked for anyway. So now you're gonna take a little bit less than what you asked for. And now you're gonna be asked to say, well, this is the number of officers that you were going to hire, because this is what you asked for. And I'm asking you to hire even less of them. Oh, and by the way, because now we're gonna repurpose even some additional funds, then now you're going to get even less of those types of officers, and you're going to get something else. How realistic is this whole notion of defunding police departments?
Well, I think that the title is misleading. And like Brother Smith said, it's not taking money away or taking jobs away from people. It's basically repurposing and reimagining what officers are called for, because it's the only occupation where if you're having problems, no matter what type of problem it is, you can pick up the phone, push 3 digits, and you'll get somebody to come 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that doesn't mean that the officers are the type of people that can handle your immediate issue. So being able to fund mental health professionals and those types of things to augment the police departments is one thing that I totally agree with. But any mayor will tell you that the first duty that they have is public safety. So there are times where a chief or a sheriff is looking at their budget and they really don't get the cuts that the rest of the city or the municipality may get based upon, well, we have to basically protect the city. The city, it will be protected, but there are some funds that are probably just given just for the fact that because the person's asking for it. So I think that a better management and a better scrutiny of those dollars, what they're used for, and you don't need to get new vehicles every year. Of course, we have a rotation process because you want to be able to get to the calls without the car breaking down. But there are some cost savings that are normally budgeted for replacement, that those cycles, if you're looking for additional mental health professionals that can assist an officer who's trained better than an officer would be to deal with these types of crises, then I'm all for that. So it's not so much of taking money away from the police. It's just basically looking at your line items and making sure that they match and that you're able to go and address the needs of the community as effectively as need be. And like Brother Smith said, there are needs for types of equipment, but there are some people who go overboard with what they get and how they utilize it. And so if I need to go rescue a group of people from Tropicana Field, I'm going to need to have the equipment to do that. But you don't need that equipment to just come to a ride through your average neighborhood, is what I'm trying to say. So there's some scrutiny that needs to be looked at as far as the budgets, because not saying that there's any misuse of funds, but those that you could look at things more with more of a keen eye to basically addressing the true needs of what that organization needs.
And with that, Brother Williams, Brother Smith, that's going to be our last word. I just want to admonish everyone. Some of the things that you're talking about, some of the things you're describing are political in nature. Some of these heads of these agencies are elected officials. And so I like what Madam Representative shared with us earlier, when she encouraged all of us to get involved, get engaged. It is a political process. Your leaders, your elected officials, we have to hold them accountable as well. And then we can get to a place where some of these solutions, community policing, reallocating funding, for mental health professionals and substance abuse professionals, et cetera, can really be put in place. But Corey Smith, Attorney Corey Smith, Esquire, West Palm Beach, private practice. And proud Alpha brother, Brother Luke Williams, know you for many years, brother. We sure appreciate y'all taking a few moments, man, out of your day. I know that it's not easy when you have family, when you have grandkids, also. But we really appreciate you joining the show today and lending your expertise and your subject matter expertise. So thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back. Monica is coming back next week. We're going to have a really interesting show. We talked about it this morning. So again, Brother Smith, Brother Williams, thank you all again. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Keith, Soul Purpose Show. We'll see you guys next week.
Wherever we